Today we have collected and compiled questions that were asked during our webinar, and we're going to be talking about a few of them. If we don't answer your question today, keep in mind that we will touch base with you to connect and talk about the specific question you had. Some of the questions were very specific to the person that asked them, and so of course, we tried to pull some related topic areas and combine them into other questions, but these are some questions that people ask that we really feel can have a direct impact on a lot of you right now. So really thank you for your time watching today, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Danielle, how are you?
Good morning, John. I'm doing well. How are you?
Wonderful and wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to both you and Next for Autism for inviting me back for this Q&A session. And thank you to all of our attendees for attending the webinar and for submitting such excellent questions. As John mentioned, many of the questions were very specific, so we identified a few broad themes that we will touch on today. And John, as I respond to these questions, I also want to invite you to contribute. As John mentioned during our webinar, John and I have been able to work together for the past few years, and I can tell you that John's knowledge base is incredibly impressive, and the work that he and Next for Autism do is exceptional. So I also want to invite him and his expertise into the conversation today.
Thank you, Danielle. That's very nice of you. And I'm happy to contribute wherever I can. So to get started, our first question relates to something that can be pretty confusing for families, especially if they're at the beginning of the transition process. And for those at the end of the process, they may feel like they've missed it a little bit. But what is Pre-ETS, and how do I access it? Why is it important? I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. So as we covered in general during the webinar, students who are identified as students with special needs and they have individualized educational plans, school districts are required to start transition planning at age 14 as part of the IEP process. So to support that, schools have different kinds of transition programming, and it really varies from program to program, district to district. So one of the things that the Division of Vocational Rehabilitative Services wanted to do was to start engaging with students in a more intentional way while they were still in their secondary school programs, in their high school programs. So through funding provided by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA, they created Priets, which is this pre-employment transition services. Now, I gave you the background about IEP process and school transition-based services because it's important to know. Pre-ETS funding can only be used to provide services that are transition related that your program, like your school district program or your private school program, is not already providing. So if your school already offers some of these services, you wouldn't be able to access them through Pre-ETS. However, if some of the services that I'm going to share, there are 5 general topics or categories. If they're not included as part of your child's current programming or services, then you could look into accessing them through Pre-ETS services, through DVR. So again, if these areas are not covered in your child's program, your student's program, your own program, and you want to look into them, you would connect with your local Division of Vocational Rehabilitative Services. And they're different in each state. So I can't give you like specifics, but that's where you would start. So what are the areas that are covered by Pre-ETS and why are we offering them? So the whole goal is to create more opportunities and meaningful opportunities for students to build, practice, and improve workplace skills and workplace readiness skills. And the ultimate goal is for everyone to achieve competitive integrated employment. So how do we attempt to accomplish that? Well, these are the areas covered by Pre-ETS. So job exploration and counseling is the first area. So just learning about the various career clusters, what's out there, what your options might be, those kinds of things. And again, many school programs include this, but some may not. Then we look at work-based learning experiences. So these could be experiences that are either on campus or they could be things that are off campus out in the community. They could be paid experiences once the individual is 16 or older, or they could be unpaid experiences. It really just depends upon each individual person, their interests, their strengths, their goals, and also, of course, availability, really with regard, I would say, to the COVID pandemic has shifted some of our opportunities right now. But if somebody wants real world workplace experience, then there should be a plan and a goal to get them there. There's also the third area is counseling on post-secondary options. So this is a little more specific, looking into, let's say, you're interested in vocational training after high school, or you're interested in going to college or university. So Priets provides the opportunity to explore those options in depth, and not just explore them, but also start doing some of the things you would need to do to pursue those options. Then the fourth area is workplace readiness training. So this includes both social skills training and also independent living skills. You know, a lot of those we mentioned during the webinar, those soft skills that help to maintain employment. So just knowing the implicit rules of the workplace, how to be a professional, showing up on time, what to wear, who to go to for help. All of those kinds of things are really important to focus on and develop. And this is where that would occur in the Priets model. And then the last category, and critically important, is self-advocacy. So of course, we want people to be as involved as they possibly can be in their planning. We really want to have a person-centered focus, and also help them to understand their own strengths, their opportunities for growth, maybe some support needs that they have, and the best ways of when and how to communicate those things in post-secondary job settings, also post-secondary academic settings. And this is, you know, the part of Priets that focuses on that. And it also includes some work with peer mentoring, which can be really powerful as well. You know, sometimes we really build our skills best when we're providing supports to other people. So that's a really important, you know, self-advocacy skill. Now, John, I want to turn it over to you. I know I invited you generally, but you know, I think one of the questions people might have is, how do we connect with businesses to provide some of those work-based learning experiences in the community? And I thought that might be something you could give some guidelines about.
Absolutely, thank you. And I do want to comment before I answer your question that Pre-ETS was a game changer for transition services for high school students, because it made accessing vocational rehabilitation supports so much easier. So if you're a parent and you've never heard of Pre-ETS, definitely speak to your child's teacher or an administrator about how to access those services and what they might look like in your state, because there are some variances from state to state on how those strategies that Danielle mentioned are implemented. But they're very similar to what she described across the country. And it's just made it so much better. Coming from someone who has previously done transition VR work as an actual caseload manager, it's really made it significantly better for transition students. So really excited, so glad you're talking about it. And I'm really glad our attendees asked about it, because it's really important.
Yeah, John, and if I can just add, I completely agree with what you said. And to that point, it also allows you to go through the DVR eligibility process much earlier than you would otherwise. So then connecting to those post-secondary resources, as John alluded to, it's just so much more streamlined. So yeah, it's, you know, accessing the resources earlier in general, but then also that's one application process that's done and out of the way when you go to look at eligibility.
And that's a great example of our government systems working very well together. Education and vocational rehabilitation really collaborating to do something that has a tremendous impact. Now, to answer your question regarding employers, you got to think like an employer when you want to connect. So if you're a school professional, but you can also be a parent with business experience or even with just some ideas about how to connect. You can be a real resource to a transition team as a parent if you have ideas about how to do this, because let's be honest, teachers went to school to learn how to teach. They learned how to educate. They learned how to guide. They learned how to mold and shape behavior. They didn't go to school to learn how to talk to businesses. This is something that for a lot of educators is acquired throughout their career, or if they were lucky enough to have a business career before being an educator, they may have brought some transferable work skills over to their new career with them. But for most educators, this isn't the thing that they learned to do and excel at. So any support, any resources can be really helpful. If you're a parent and you're a business owner, or you're a member of a business, or a member of a chamber of commerce, or a member of an association, an industry group, that can be a real asset to a transition planning team in terms of building partnerships. So I just wanted to remind you that if you're a parent, you might be thinking, well, what's my role in this? You can be thinking of yourself in some ways as a business engagement consultant for that team if you have that background. And that's a real valuable resource to bring, not just being the parent of that child, but also having that expertise from a business perspective. So think like a business. Why would a business want to partner with a school? To help students prepare for the workforce, or to help them figure out what they want to do, or to help them learn really valuable job skills? Well, first and foremost, companies are continually cultivating talent pipelines so that their workforce needs are met. And many industries, you'll learn if you look into labor data, many industries really have challenges with applicant flow, meaning that they don't get as many applicants as they want, or maybe they don't get applicants with the specific skills they're looking for, or maybe they don't get applicants with the experience they're looking for. And so in some ways, because of that, companies may bring on talent that isn't ideal, but it's the option they have. So keep in mind that any opportunity you have to help a company cultivate that talent pipeline, especially in the community in which they're actually hiring, is a tremendous asset to a business. And if 5% of students end up interested in their specific industry or even their specific company, the return on investment for that business working with you could be great. Maybe they only need 5 candidates over a period of years, and it'll be worth it to them to assist you. Plus, there's this brand component too. If you think about corporate social responsibility, companies more than ever are aware that they need to contribute to their communities. They need to have an impact in a positive way on citizens, on stakeholders, on customers, on employees. And so connecting with a school to support the career development of students with disabilities is a great way to show the community that they care and that they actually want to contribute to society in a meaningful way. So if you think about that, combined with the fact that you can cultivate this talent pipeline, it changes the way you as a professional or you as a parent might talk to that business. Instead of saying it's the right thing to do, which it is, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, but instead of saying that, you can say, we can help you cultivate your future talent pool. Keep in mind, people with disabilities are the largest untapped pool of talent. People with disabilities are the intersection of all diversity and every diversity category. So you're achieving a lot of business needs by connecting them with this talent pool. And because they're in school, we have years to help them develop specific skills. You can provide information to our educators so they know what your expectations are and what the qualifications are for your industry. We can share information with students so they won't learn more about that industry and your company. So maybe they don't end up being an employee, perhaps they become a consumer. And in some ways, that's really beneficial because we know that the consumer market of people with disabilities, their families, and those connected to them represents a lot of money in our market. And so that also speaks to companies and their bottom line. So there's a lot of reasons it's beneficial to a business. But I will say this, Danielle, because this is important and you know this, it's not, we're going to come in and do everything for you. We've got job coaches, we've got teachers, we've got the students. We're just going to show up and we're going to partner and do a specific activity, or you're going to come in and just talk to us about your company. They have to have some skin in the game. They need to recognize that they're getting a lot out of this, and so they have to invest as well. They need to be committed to it. Can't tell you how many businesses I've seen that were sold this story that they're doing the school a favor, and then when you go on site, you can barely ever talk to a manager, and in some ways you kind of feel like they don't even see you while you're there. And of course, we'll talk about how the pandemic might change the way these partnerships look, but I think it's really important to understand that a partnership goes both ways. And a great way to tell if someone is truly interested in partnering, are they willing to talk about you and the partnership? And if they're excited about talking to the public about working with you, that shows you their level of commitment. If they're not wanting to do that, then that might suggest they're not fully committed. So it's something to think about.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for adding all of that, John. And I also want to, say that during the webinar, we mentioned the importance of reflecting on your own experiences, and connected to what John just shared. So many of us got our first jobs or even subsequent jobs through our network, through thinking about who do we know that does this or owns this business, and how can I connect myself or someone else that I know to that opportunity. And so it really is so critical to think about supporting your student, yourself, your child in the same kind of way that John mentioned in his initial comments. Really thinking about yourself as somebody who's connecting that individual to your professional network, in addition to whatever connection you already have to them. It's so important, and it's something that for some of us happens sort of naturally. That network just expands. But for people who have limited opportunities to interact with others in professional settings, or limited exposure to work-based and professional-based settings, it's harder to build that network. So again, this is something that by approaching the situation with that same sort of framework you would use if you were looking for a job, supports that. And also Priets supports that too, because as John just mentioned, just working for different businesses, volunteering, interning, you create a connection with that business, and who knows what that might turn into later with regard to opportunities. So just important to conceptualize things in that way.
Yeah, and related to something you just said, Danielle, if you think about our role in preparing students for the workforce, you also have to think about how are we as organizations and as professionals, and even you parents, how are we promoting inclusion in our communities? Mm-hmm. And one of the academic literature shows us one of the most effective ways to address bias or exclusionary behaviors, whether it's stereotyping or social avoidance or those types of things that stem from a bias society might have, public attitudes toward people with disabilities. The most effective thing you can do is just have contact with someone with a disability and get to know them. So imagine that a company is partnering with you to give students exposure to their industry, even if it's not work-based learning, and it's just an opportunity for students to see a business, which could be a tour, could be shadowing. The contact that their employees are going to have with a person with a disability contributes to them confronting their own personal bias and reducing the impact that bias might have on opportunities for people with disabilities. So understand that the benefits aren't even just to your students, but society as a whole by connecting with them, because you're giving them an outlet to have that type of engagement. And that's really, really important. I just wanted to touch on that because you mentioned some self-awareness. And I think part of what you're giving businesses an opportunity to do is allow employees of those businesses to confront their own bias and have some level of self-awareness about that. So we have another wonderful question that I think stems really well from some of the things you talked about in terms of self-direction. So this is a term that people hear often and don't always know exactly what it means. And also, why is it important? So what is self-direction? Why is that important for a student to have that skill?
So this is another great question. So self-direction refers to a specific service delivery model in the adult world in which the individual seeking the services is in the driver's seat. And it has its roots in person-centered planning, which we did mention during the webinar. We did not talk specifically about self-direction. But the whole notion is to expand a person's ability and opportunities to make individual choices for themselves by giving them greater control over their supports, their services, the planning. This is, in the adult world, and the person-centered planning can begin, I want to be clear, while students are still in school, and it should begin while they're still in school. And with the person-centered process, you want to start giving the student more influence and control over the IEP planning process. And really, if you think that you or your child, your student, would be a good fit for self-directed services, what a great way to get them ready for that planning process by having them engage really in a very substantial way with their IEP planning process in school. So in any case, so self-direction, again, it's an adult services delivery model. And the way that it works is that the individual actually is given, a budget based upon their eligibility. So going through like similar application processes for Medicaid, things like that. And they actually receive supports through a fiscal intermediary, at least in the state of New Jersey, that's the term that's used, to help them with managing and designing their budget. They select their support coordinator. They can, if they want to, they can designate some important individuals in their lives to be actively engaged with the planning and implementation process. If not, they can just choose to completely be in charge of their self-directed planning and service delivery on their own independently. They get to select the members on their team, their planning team. And they also, after they develop that service plan, they get to choose their services, supports, and who provides them. And they ultimately, and this is the language used in the guidance documents in New Jersey, they have hire and fire authority. So they really get to decide, what's next for them, how, what that looks like, and how those services and supports are going to be delivered. And if they're not satisfied with them, or if it's not a good fit, they have the authority and opportunity to make changes. So it really is a way to respect the freedom, and authority of individuals in their own lives, in their own planning processes, and to really confirm the fact that people with disabilities should have as much autonomy and control over their own lives and circumstances as possible. So it's again just it's a particular service delivery kind of model, and as you're going through that transition planning process, certainly if you're doing person-centered planning, this would be one opportunity for post-secondary services that you might want to explore. John, is there anything that you'd like to add about self-direction or self-directed services?
I think it's so important, and it's a vital it's a vital resource in a way that really promotes independence in adult life, which is the goal for every student, whether you have a disability or not. We want you to be as independent as possible. I do think it's important to know that every system you operate in may have different language. And so as you learn self-direction in this sort of context, understand that if you hear that term in like a vocational rehabilitation, it might not take on the same meaning. So just know that if you have an educator, they may not understand the other system. And so they may not have the awareness that you're operating off of a different definition. So if you hear a vocational rehabilitation counselor refer to self-direction and they're talking more about like a functional capacity of your child or of you as a person, understand. They may have no idea about the context that you're familiar with the term. I think it's really important to be successful in multiple different service delivery systems to know that their language in some ways is similar, but in some ways is completely opposite and can confuse you, because you'll go into a meeting thinking one thing and leave it thinking they talked about something, unless you stop them and say, what do you mean by that? Here's what I think this means. And then you can sort of make sure you're understanding each other. Danielle, we also had a really good question. I'd love to end on this one because I think it's really important. Obviously, we know that the current circumstances where we are right now, the pandemic has influenced how we provide transition services in a tremendous way, and how we partner with businesses in a pretty significant way, and really how we provide education in general. Whether you're a student with a disability or not, schools have had to adapt, organizations have had to adapt, society has had to adapt in a significant way. So how can a educator or a team around a person adapt to providing transition during this pandemic, or in this new normal that we've become accustomed to?
Yeah, I think again, an important question. So the pandemic has obviously reshaped our daily lives in many different ways. I think there are a couple of opportunities that have emerged as the result of the pandemic that I don't think would have happened otherwise. The first is, I think that really the pandemic has allowed greater and equal access to community events than maybe was present before because of the virtual format. You know, you can go to all sorts of things as a member of your community that maybe you wouldn't have had the chance to attend before, or would not have felt comfortable with attending before. It just gives you the opportunity to try lots of different things. And so I think that exploration component is critically important for us as people at all stages of our lives, but especially when we're trying to determine what it is that we might like to do. So I really encourage you to look into, you know, not just things like, I mean, there are virtual visits to, you know, museums and just all different community resources that allow you to explore those things in different ways. And then there are community specific gatherings that you can attend, and they vary widely, so I won't even attempt to give a list, but definitely seek those things out. And those are a great way to explore things with regard to recreation, leisure, hobbies, potentially even career interests, or just establishing more community connections. So I would really encourage that. And I know many schools have incorporated that into their programming. I think you can also explore career clusters in a very intentional way, and maybe there's greater access to industries that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to access before. It's a much lower level of commitment to have a employer business owner agree to meet for like 30 minutes on Zoom and show you around their shop than it would be to agree to host people in person, and the amount of time that would take, maybe the disruption to service to customers, things like that. So I think there are a lot more opportunities to reach out now to businesses and employers and ask, can we interview you? Can we do a virtual tour? Can we, you know, do a part-day job shadow virtually? I just think that the access there again has increased significantly, and there are organizations that are putting some of those things out more ready-made now to attract customers. A lot of businesses are creating things like virtual tours or virtual walkthroughs of services. So again, looking for those things. Another thing that's more readily available are these, exactly what we're doing right now, webinars and you know, learning on demand. So this is a great time to look at resources to assist with planning and start building up your knowledge base there, perhaps your vocabulary in specific systems, as John made reference to. And again, I won't give a list of examples because they would be probably based in New Jersey, you know, where I operate. But I know that, you know, all kinds of organizations are providing webinars for free or at a very reduced cost on how to access, and apply for Medicaid services, vocational rehab, DDD services, all of those things. So I would really encourage you to search those items out. The second way I think that the pandemic has really reshaped things in an important way is the creation of remote and work from home job opportunities, which we know for some individuals are a much better fit. I would just say some individuals, not just individuals with disabilities, but for some people, the opportunity to work remotely or work from home is just a better match for them. So I think that has also expanded the possibilities. We now have a much better understanding of what can be done from home and what that work looks like. And I think that that's going to create a lot of new job opportunities and something perhaps that would be a better fit for a person who's looking at different post-secondary options. John, anything you'd like to add?
That was wonderful. Yeah, I definitely, in relation to what you mentioned about there being more opportunity because of the pandemic, I will say that there's an increased sense of flexibility from businesses. So you may not get the outcome you want. Maybe you're really focused on helping students actually get jobs. And you're lucky and you are able to establish some remote opportunities. But maybe for, like Danielle said, that's beneficial for some, but for others, that's not. And so you may be thinking, this is a significant challenge. Well, just know that an investment in a business, keep in mind, everybody's going through this together. So businesses have really been impacted in many ways. And as things start to open up, businesses will be rebuilding, will be trying to capture consumers they lost who stopped using their services for a variety of reasons. It could have been convenience, it could have been concerns about health and safety. And so you're going to see businesses competing to recapture consumers and also absorb consumers from other businesses. And so there's going to be an increase in the competitive strategies that they will employ to do so. And one of the things we know is that consumers prefer companies that hire people with disabilities. So connecting with this talent pool is going to be a post-pandemic solution for companies. And I think you really have to acknowledge that and recognize that you may have a little bit of work now that doesn't get you the outcome you want, but it can pay dividends in the long run, because when a company is ready, you've been in front of them during this period of time. Maybe you've connected, you've provided education, you've exposed them to students in a way that they're able to do informational interviews like Danielle mentioned, or a virtual tour that they navigate. And it's not just the planning that goes into that. It could be the company has very strict safety guidelines. They don't have to worry about any of that if you're not coming in the building. So the access you get to see things you may never actually get to see unless you're an employee can go up. And if you're giving them these types of opportunities, when things reopen, you have a completely different relationship than you would have if you just didn't talk to them at all. So recognize it's an investment now with a payoff later. So, understanding there are students now that aren't going to benefit from that, and there are students now who may even graduate before they're able to benefit from that. It is a benefit to future students. So Danielle, I really want to thank you again for your time, and we appreciate you so much. If you're interested in connecting with Dr. Taylor, you can reach her at spectrum.org. And if you're interested in connecting with Next for Autism, nextforautism.org. Really appreciate everyone who watched this video. Hopefully you found something helpful. If we didn't answer your questions, we'll be in touch. But thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful day. Danielle, thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you again to Next for Autism, and thank you to everyone who has attended. Be well, everyone.